and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. This is episode 38, and in this episode, I'll be sharing with you how to overcome disappointment in your marriage and come out stronger. Yes, right. You heard me right. How do you come out stronger even though you've had disappointments in your marriage? Now, this episode is the second in the series on managing expectations and setbacks. So if you did not listen to the first episode in this series, you want to go back and listen to episode 37, which is the first episode in this series that we've started. There's 2 more episodes to go. So to make sure you don't miss out on any of the future episodes, subscribe to the show today and you'll be able to be reminded whenever new episodes come out. Now, I want to encourage you to also bookmark this podcast, right? Subscribe to the show, bookmark this podcast, and you always have access, right, to the shows. And you can always go to happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com, and have access to all the episodes just in case you have missed some, and it's all listed there for you to be able to go back and check out just in case, right? Now, if you're listening for the first time, let me say this, you may or may not agree with all that you hear, and quite frankly, I don't expect you to. Why? Because you are smart. You would not be listening to this show if you were not somebody, I believe, who's drawn to this episode or this podcast because you have a good sense of perspective and insights, and I believe you have a good sense of self-awareness. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's all true, that you have all those things all in alignment and always operating in all those cylinders, because sometimes even me, I don't operate in all those cylinders all the time, but that's the reason why you're listening. And so if you, as you listen, and you may not agree, then I get it. Because again, that's who you are. You might be triggered by some of what you'll hear on this episode. But remember, that is one of the purpose of this show, right? That's, if you've listened to me for some time, you've heard me say this over and over again, that what I like to do is to be a contrarian sometimes and stir things up and come from a different angle and maybe make a statement or give you an idea or share with you something that will help you that you may not be hearing too often. Because again, there's people out there who are regurgitating what they've heard, and it's almost the same old, right? I want to break away from that. And that's why you may be surprised by some things you've heard and triggered by those things. But listen, this is what I promise you. I promise you that I'll always bring you for a solid landing or a safe landing, right? And you can always share your thoughts and comments and give me some feedback. You could always DM me on any social media platform. And you can also email us with any comments or anything you want to share with us. You can always do that. If you hear something that you may say, man, I would love to be on that show and talk about my experience, please reach out to us, because we're always looking for real life guests, people who have gone through, you are a spouse, you are a husband, a wife, and you've gone through some of the things you're hearing. I would love to talk to you and interview you, not to throw you under the bus, not to get you to put all the dirty laundry out there, but just to ask how you have navigated and gone through some things that you've gone through, and now you are where you are. So if you have a story that you think would benefit the audience on this show, please let me know. I would love to have you on as a guest on this podcast. Now, this show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com, and our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode as in every other episode. So stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up, or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage podcast. Today, we're talking about as we mentioned before, how to overcome disappointments in your marriage and come out stronger. That's right. You heard me. How to overcome disappointment in your marriage and come out stronger. Here's what I do know, and you probably is going to say that this is true of you as well, that every relationship, every marriage have had some disappointments at some point, right? And that's why when this episode today, you'll hear some things that possibly will help you or remind you of some things you've done as you overcame some of your own disappointments. Now, just to remind you that you can also watch video episodes of topics like this one on my YouTube channel, Kingsley Grant. So I would encourage you to go there and watch the YouTube shorts, watch the YouTube videos. But when you do go there, would you please do me 3 things? All right. Number 1, smash the subscribe button. Number 2, click on the like button and also on the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of the video broadcasts that I do record on my YouTube channel. So make sure that you do go there and just consume, right? Just digest all that's there as well. You can't have enough helpful information, and I want to provide you with both the visual as well as the podcast episodes. And I do different episodes on both platforms. And so you might want to go there and check out maybe something you have missed in the past, as I've covered quite a bit of topics on that. So make sure whatever you do at this point in this episode, now we've covered all those kind of preliminaries. Stick around to the end, and we have something very special for you that the announcer will make mention of at the end of this episode. So stick around. Again, let me simply say thanks for joining me on this episode. As you've already heard, we are talking about how to overcome disappointment in your marriage and come out stronger. Now, having counseled and coached hundreds of couples over the years as a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, and from what I've experienced as a husband of more than 3 decades, almost 4, I am able to talk about topics like this one with confidence both from a personal and professional standpoint. And I hope that you'll appreciate that in what I have to share in this episode. Now, this is a very important topic because every one of us, including myself, who are in a relationship for any length of time, will experience disappointment. Some couples begin from the very day they say, I do. And I hope you're not one of those. But if you are, there's no judgment here. There's no one going to say from me, you're not going to hear me say it's right or wrong. It's not to judge what happens. I'm just simply stating a fact that some couples, from the very beginning of their relationship, their marriage, even on their honeymoon night, for one reason or another, they'll come away with disappointment. They may not share it at the time because, of course, it's a honeymoon, but they hold on to that. I've heard from couples years later how disappointed they were on their honeymoon night. And it may not just be because of sexual disappointment. It could be for whatever reason they had in their mind what that should look like, and they were let down, right? It was not what they had thought. It wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, from what they've heard going into their honeymoon. It could be for, again, a number of reasons, and I won't get into that because that would be digressing from the topic. Now, other couples have experienced disappointments at different points in their marriage. Again, if you've been married for any length of time, you may have you have experienced disappointments. And the question is, how do you handle them? How did you handle them? And I want to share with you, because if you are struggling with those disappointments, maybe today you're still holding on to a disappointment of the past. Well, how do you come out stronger on the other side? That's what this episode will talk about today. So disappointment in marriage is not unique to you. It's not unique to you. You're not the only one who've experienced disappointment. I can tell you that I've experienced a number of disappointments in my almost 4 decades of marriage. And I can tell you my wife also will say to you that she have also experienced disappointments. We all have. We all will. And I can tell you, we will still at some point be disappointed. And it may not necessarily be with her, my wife, or she with me, right? It could be things that we together had dreams of and goals working towards, and it never happened. And we were disappointed about those things. So in this episode, I'm speaking from both a personal and professional point of view. So how to overcome disappointment in your marriage and come out stronger? Here's the first thing I want to mention as to what that may look like. And that's the first thing you need to do. Well, one of the first things is acknowledge and validate your feelings. Acknowledge and validate your feelings. Disappointment in marriage can often stem from, as you may have by now figured in what I've shared, unmet expectations or unfulfilled desires. It is important to acknowledge and validate those feelings because they are real. It's something that you're experiencing, and rather than suppress them or pretending like it's never happening and everything is okay, you've got to express them, share them. Your partner may ask you, what's wrong? They can tell something is wrong, right? Or you may see something in your spouse and you ask him or her, what's wrong? And they said, nothing. And you know there's something going on. Or maybe it was something that happened the night before with you and your spouse. And so one maybe had an expectation of the night. Maybe they were looking for a romantic evening or a night that never happened for one reason or another. And so they are disappointed. And so the next day you're seeing this disappointment, but you don't know what's going on. You didn't even know that this person had these expectations for whatever that expectation was. Maybe it's sexual, right? Maybe it's just to be able to hold and sleep together and fall asleep together. Maybe it was to have a conversation about something that you had promised to talk about and nothing materialized. And so there's a disappointment. And the next day it's very obvious that you are disappointed or your partner is disappointed, but it's not expressed. It's not acknowledged. It's almost like suppressing as if nothing happened, but you can tell because sometimes some people wear their emotions on their sleeves and you can tell there's something going on. So if you have a relationship with your spouse where there's an emotional safety in your relationship, this is a time to talk to your partner about how you feel and express your concerns. But do so in a very calm and respectful manner because it may be a disappointment that you had because you never expressed your desire, what you wanted. And so your partner didn't know, and now you are disappointed. But share that with them and also take partial responsibility because you never shared, so your partner did not know. Because by doing so, it helps you to create a safe and supportive environment where both of you can work through issues together because now you put it out there and the relationship now knows what is going on and you can have a conversation around that. Number 2, focus on the positive. Focus on the positive. Now it's easy, and you may be able to attest to this, to get caught up in the negatives when you're feeling disappointed in your marriage, right? Because your brain is looking at the negative things and you begin to connect the dots and look at different times where something like this happened before. And all of a sudden you're spiraling, right? You're beginning to move into this negative space where everything seems to be like nothing is positive. You've got to push back hard And remember that there are always positives in every relationship. So I would suggest at those times, hit the pause button. Take a deep breath, because you don't want to spiral where you get to the point of no return. It's when you're experiencing something that's negative, right? Especially if it's not a recurring thing where this is the same thing happening over and over again. And just put a pause and either write down, you could literally write down a list of all the things you appreciate about your partner. Make a case for them, right? Within your marriage. If you want to list that out or think about it or document that in your head, itemize them in your head, I would suggest, though, the best thing is to write that down so you can kind of download them from your mind and not be, you have more concentration if you're writing them down or typing them out in your phone or something like that. But you want to be able to shift and pivot back to the positive. Because when you're focusing on the positive aspects of your marriage, what that does is help to shift your perspective, right? And you're going to feel better. Your mood will change. Your mood will have to change when you are looking at the positive, because what happened is your brain begins to reward you as those pleasant memories start surfacing. You begin to remember those stories behind those moments, and your mood begins to shift away from the negative to the positive. Number 3, this is one you may have heard many, many times, and I've covered this and used this one quite a bit because it's essential, and that is practice self-care. As you know, taking care of yourself is so important, right? It's very important, especially during times of disappointment. Again, you want to realize that this is something that is happening, but it's not permanent. Sometimes your brain would treat a disappointment as if it's a finale. It's permanent. It's here to stay. But as you have known, that disappointments are not permanent, right? Unless you make it that way. I love what I've heard sometimes especially when it comes from a spiritual perspective. People will say, and I've said it to myself and unto others, that our disappointment could be God's appointment. Our disappointment could be God's appointment for Him to work on something in our lives. He may want to use that to bring out something that we may be lacking. Maybe it's patience. Maybe it's gentleness. Maybe it's self-control. Maybe it's forgiveness. There's something that He may want to use that disappointment to teach us and bring out in our lives as He mold us into the better version of ourselves. So take time for yourself, practice self-care, engage in activities that make you happy and fulfilled, right? What if you were to turn that disappointment in an opportunity that could be used as fuel to do something for yourself? Maybe you're disappointed about something with your husband or your wife, and you take yourself out for, again, for a manicure, a pedicure, or just a massage, or something that is healthy and helpful to you, that makes you happy, right? I would suggest not get into emotional eating, as some people would do, but that's not healthy, right? But do something that's healthy. It could be reading a book, going for a walk, pray, meditate, spend time with friends. Because again, you may be disappointed that something didn't turn out, a date didn't happen as you were hoping for. Maybe your spouse had to work longer or is away and didn't come home because of flights and whatever a case might be. Well, you could take advantage of that moment and do something very special for yourself. But prioritize self-care, and this will create positive energy, right? You'll be energized when you do that. So practice self-care. Number 4, sometimes disappointments, especially if they're reoccurring, may be something that's too much for you. It's overwhelming. And this is where I want to suggest to seek professional help, because it's just too much for you to handle on your own. You've tried different aspects of what we've suggested so far, but you still are struggling because that disappointment that you've had is just a big one, right? It's just something that you never really expected. And it's really throwing you for a curve. It's throwing you for a loop. You just don't know how to navigate, how to manage. This is where I would encourage you to seek professional help from a therapist or a counselor or your pastor, a spiritual leader. They can pray with you. They can counsel with you. Your therapist could help you to get better perspective on some things. So it's beneficial for you, right? Get someone who is trained, though, to be able to look at what you are presenting and find the underlying issues, because that disappointment may not be the issue. It may not be the thing that's really at play. It could be the straw that broke the camel's back. It could be the very thing that really drove you into a very depressed mode or anxious mode. And that is only probably triggering something else that's going on that a professional therapist or counselor could identify. Now, if it's something to do with some deeper issues, past issues, trauma of any kind, let me encourage you to seek out professional help, someone who's been trained in this area, because that disappointment may have just brought to light something that was going on all this time, because you want to develop healthy coping strategies and how to be able to improve your communication skills so that you can talk to your spouse, if needs be, about the matter, or someone else in your family. It could be disappointment in the family, but this will help you to know how to manage that in a way that is more constructive and more productive. Now, before I give you the fifth way of how to manage disappointments, right? How to overcome disappointments and come out stronger. Before I give that to you, let me say, in speaking about professional help, sometimes by you being proactive and doing something about your relationship, your marriage, it could really stave off some of these things you're now experiencing. And that's why I want to encourage you to take the marriage assessment quiz, because that disappointment may be a reason for you to say, maybe it's time for me to look at the state of our marriage. Look at the state of our marriage. And so I've provided or created a marriage assessment quiz. Is designed to help you to gauge the state of your marriage. And what you'll get is a numeric score. And then you'll also get provided with a guidance on what your next step should be. You'll get a PDF also that will explain the scores to you, right? That you can have a chance to know there's 4 zones that you could fall into. And it could be the blissful zone, ambiguous zone, gridlock zone, or the peril zone, right? And you may want to guess what those zones could be, but the PDF will explain those 4 zones: blissful, ambiguous, gridlock, or peril. And the number you receive on the score will be a way to see which of the zones you fall into, right? So you can access this quiz at happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz, happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz. And the link will also be provided in the description of this episode. Okay. So now, number 5, the 5th way that you can overcome disappointments is to reevaluate your expectations. I cannot tell you what these expectations you have in your marriage, with your spouse, and especially if they're not expressed, especially if you've not talked about them, is you almost like have this idea that he should know or she should know. I don't need to tell them about what I expect when I come home, or expect when I'm leaving to work, or expect during the day. It's an assumption is being made that he or she should know what you expect. My question is, how are they going to know if you haven't told them? They can't read your mind, and you don't want them to, because they could get it wrong. So it's your responsibility to let your partner know what your expectations are, especially when you leave home, come home during the day, and talk about those things. Because these disappointments can often arise from the unrealistic or uncommunicated expectations. Because sometimes it's not just because you've not communicated them, but you have an unrealistic expectation. So for example, you may be a stay-at-home spouse and your partner works outside the home and you work inside the home. And there might be some unrealistic expectation because your partner works at home. You come home and expect all this 3-course meal and, all this fine dining kind of thing, or the house should be exquisite. I mean, clean from top to bottom, and kids are involved and everything should be in its right place. You have what I'm talking about. And so you have these unrealistic expectations. Or maybe your spouse works outside the home and worked a long day, come home and you expect him or her to now come and do a lot of the things that could have been done during the daytime. And somehow that when they come home tired mentally and emotionally and physically and otherwise, and there's just expectation for them as if they never went out and worked outside the home. That could be unrealistic, right? So it's important to reevaluate your expectations and make sure they are reasonable. Make sure they're reasonable and also achievable. So these are the conversations you want to have with your spouse about what these look like. Come up with a plan that could work and both of you could sign off on, right? And so you kind of co-created these things so you can have more of a realistic goals and plans that would be helpful for you and the relationship. So these five ways I've outlined here, I believe can help you to overcome disappointment in your marriage and you can come out stronger. And here are the 5 that I've listed again. Number 1, acknowledge and validate your feelings. Number 2, focus on the positive. Number 3, practice self-care. Number 4, seek professional help. And number 5, reevaluate your expectations. And maybe number 5 should be number 1, but I held that for the last because I believe it's one of the most important of the 5, even though all 5 are important. Now, I would love to hear from you what you found most helpful in this episode. What was it that kind of resonated with you? That you felt like, man, that's me or my relationship. So make sure you DM me, connect with us, and the announcer will tell you how to do that as well. But also will tell you about how to get a special gift because you waited and you listened to the end of this episode. But before she comes, let me invite you again to check out happiermarriagesecrets.com, where you'll find our podcast and our blog posts. And remember the quiz. Take the quiz at happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz. Do that today. Make sure you make a note of that as you're driving. Just make an audible note in your phone or write that down someplace so that you'll be able to do that today. Okay. And the links will be provided in the description of this episode. So thanks again for listening. And the announcer will now tell you how to get your free gift just for staying to the end. Now let's go and make marriages happier again. Here is the announcer.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1, make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2, subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3, get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.